So, after the banal, annoying, and pointless miniseries that was trying to pretend it was all about Sally Acorn, I'm actually looking forward to going back to the main book in all its mood whiplash. And what do you know, we've got ourselves another silly one today, one that I admit I enjoy despite my inherent annoyance at evil twin plots. And going by the cover, that's basically what we're looking at today, but it seems we're getting a bit more than just an evil imposter Sonic this time. It looks like we're getting a whole slew of evil clones. The cover this time around is rather plain to what we've been getting before, especially compared to the incredibly detailed work of the Sally miniseries, with only two main colors made to look like a light shining down on Sonic and friends as they face down their evil counterparts in a rather classic comics trope of two opposing teams facing each other on the cover. Well, this one has a bit more kinetic energy to it, and the fact that not everyone's perfectly center makes it look like a more natural shot. In terms of overall composition and detail, it is a bit of a step backward from what we were seeing before. We open on Sonic kicking a pig into a mud puddle. It would almost be shocking if the front cover hadn't already spoiled what's really going on. Obviously, it's Sonic's evil twin from the reverse Mobius he visited before, and he's obviously masquerading as Sonic, for real this time, rather than it being a case of mistaken identity, or just the two of them on opposite sides. And he's not alone. Over the next few pages, we get introduced to each of the evil freedom fighters as they try to frame their respective doppelgangers for, well, petty vandalism and dickish behavior. Sally knocks a little girl into a pond and makes her cry. Tails harasses a turtle by knocking him over and throwing a tomato at him. Antoine actually has one of the more serious crimes as he drives recklessly around the town and knocks over an apple cart, even backing up to make applesauce. And then Rotor vandalizes a store, mafia style, with a bat. Geez, that's actually pretty brutal as far as kids' comics go, but it does lead to a pretty funny, if random, joke where Rotor writes out a ticket to the shopkeep since there wasn't enough room for him to swing his bat. Oh, and if you're wondering, there is no evil bunny, and there won't be for another 140 issues or so. Bunny herself is conspicuously absent during this whole affair, and isn't even paid any lip service as to where she is, much like many of the earlier issues. I honestly don't get why this keeps happening either. It's not like Bunny was a secondary character. She was introduced in the second issue and was made a full member of the team, on par with Tails, Rotor, and Antoine, and yet it sort of seems like many of the creators just forget about her sometimes. Anyway, the evil versions of our heroes all meet up in the woods, talking about how evil they are and how they're just going to keep wrecking the reputations of the actual freedom fighters. And then the comic decides now might be a good time for a flashback. Literally, next page of the comic puts on the brakes and tells us that since we've probably figured out that these guys aren't the real freedom fighters, seriously comic, pointing out how obvious your plots are doesn't make them funny. It's going to give us a look at who they actually are. And we see evil Sonic sitting at his desk doing evil business, I suppose. He says he's bored, but what I find more interesting are the hearts on his desk. Sonic plus Bunny, Sonic plus Sally, Sonic plus Nicole. Damn, this guy gets around. And keep in mind, this is before Nicole gets an actual body, implying so many terrible things. And then there's this one, Sonic plus Sonic. Well, I guess there's nothing wrong with a little bit of self-loving now and then. Evil Sonic goes to his evil hideout, where evil Sally proceeds to give him an evil beatdown. If you haven't figured it out by now, the counterparts don't really like one another that much. Sally says she wants some action, and no, not the fun kind, she's spoiling for a fight. So evil Sonic decides to take this as an opportunity to have some fun with the good copies of himself, and rounds up his gang, driving into the cosmic interstates, somehow, to go and ruin Sonic and Friends' reputation. We cut over to the real freedom fighters who are coming out of a portal of their own. Turns out that Rotor made an invention to roll into the Zone of Silence, supposedly where Robotnik banished the king during the coup. Unfortunately, the zone wasn't exactly welcoming to them, and they had no idea where they were going, the zone's chaotic nature making it impossible for Nicole to show them where to go. Sonic's reluctant to tell Sally what they're up to, not wanting to raise her hopes when they don't have a solid way of getting the king out of the zone. Of course, Sally chooses that exact moment to walk in, overhearing the very end of the conversation. While she's momentarily distracted by a passing reference to her miniseries, it isn't long before she tries to bring the conversation back to what was going on while she was away, only for a knock at the door to distract everyone. Turns out the locals aren't exactly pleased with them, thinking that they're responsible for all the mischief that the evil versions have been causing, and they literally run them out of town. And this, folks, is the primary reason why I can't stand these evil clone stories. Sonic, Sally, and the rest are well-known heroic figures in this world. The Freedom Fighters are a beacon of hope, a small guerrilla group fighting a seemingly impossible war against a dictator who'd conquered pretty much the entire world. And all of them have shown over and over again that despite all of the hardship they've been through, they're all really good people at heart. They've foiled dozens, if not hundreds, of evil plots at this point in their fight against him, and everyone knows this. So why would they be so quick to turn on these characters when they're well aware that this is not how they act? Even in a comedy story, this is impossible to reconcile, and there are plenty of shows, comics, books, what have you, that do this. The worst part about it is the fact that this comic, especially during this time, loves this trope, and it will be used in a much worse fashion in a far more serious context later on. Moving along from that, the Freedom Fighters are licking their wounds, pondering who could have been impersonating them and how best to capture them. Sally offers up a plan, which of course we don't get to hear right away, and cut to the evil Freedom Fighters doing what they do best, terrorizing some people on their bikes, and then they notice this inconspicuous group of gypsies off to the side. Yes, gypsies, we're really going with that. I guess we're just going full-blown Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog again. As they're riding towards the group, Sally launches an arrow across several panels that, despite not visibly having a way to latch onto something, judging by the arrowhead, manages to pull a rope taut enough to cause all three of their vehicles to flip, tossing the doppelgangers from their rides. Still not recognizing the gypsies as the one they're impersonating, Evil Sonic takes a swing at Mustache Sonic, only to take a punch of his own with a glorious Adam West sound effect for good measure. At this point, the jig is up and the fight begins in this chaotic one-page spread, which I really like. It's a little bit plain in terms of the background, obviously, but the chaos shown here is pretty engaging. I do like the effect of the two Sonics circling around everyone else as they pair off with their respective doubles. However, as the fight goes on, it becomes clear to the Freedom Fighters that they're in a stalemate, and their doubles are able to match them blow for blow. So, Sally recommends changing partners, which everyone immediately does. And it works, and I actually like the idea behind this. Well, one could make the argument that some of these pairings don't really make much sense, like Evil Sonic being stopped by Tails of all people, though in all seriousness, in every appearance that he has past and future, Evil Sonic has always been a pretty pathetic loser. I've always taken this as a demonstration of how well the Freedom Fighters know one another. The evil group was shown to be dicks to everyone, including one another, mostly only hanging out with one another for the intimidation factor and not much else. But the real Freedom Fighters are intimately familiar with one another's strengths and weaknesses, and so it makes sense that they'd be able to fend off someone that they knew, but their doubles didn't. Also, we get this.
You wouldn't hit a lady.
You ain't no lady.
And so the day is saved. The evil group is defeated and the real Freedom Fighters' names are cleared, even though they shouldn't have had to clear them in the first place, and even Evil Sonic is pretty satisfied as he got exactly what he wanted as well. A fight. This issue is pretty alright. Once again, we're back to humor, but compared to the action-heavy borefest we've been through in the Sally miniseries, I think this works a lot better. I'm still not a fan of this sort of setup, and I've already outlined my reasons why, but the humor here is pretty good, and despite it being a comedy story, it actually has a bit more to do with the ongoing story. With efforts to find King Acorn and references to the mission in the Sally miniseries, and the introduction of all the evil Freedom Fighters who would come back as a much more competent threat in the future. In terms of artwork, it's once again a bit of a step backwards. The characters look a whole lot better in this story than they did in the Sally miniseries, where we had to deal with the substitute Freedom Fighters' nightmare designs, but the backgrounds took a big hit, and you'll notice that a majority of them are a single solid color, or the details in the background are pretty much non-existent. And so now we are moving to issue 25, and we have ourselves another milestone issue for the comic. How do we celebrate? With an adaptation of one of the biggest fan-favorite games in the franchise. Next time, it's Sonic vs. Metal. I'll see you all there.